So I want to talk about the article that Riot released in August 2016 about their import rule, which basically states that the current imports that were NNA during that time uh, had their import status increased from 2 years to 4 years. So if you had already been there for 2 years, well, now you have to wait 2 more fucking years. And then those who are trying to get in after August 2016 basically couldn't get off of import status unless you took your citizenship test. And the reasoning for this was under the current system, it's likely that by the end of this year, 4 out of 5 starting players will be imported players on many teams in certain regions, which drove us to make these changes. The imp will still require that teams field no more than 2 non-residents and at minimum 3 imp residents on their starting roster. Now, let's go over, I think it's easier to do the teams that don't have imports, which are CLG, FlyQuest, Fnatic, Splice, and UOL. In terms of the EU and NA LCS. I think those are it. And so citizenship being a requirement for non-imports, let's be real, that's really fucking hard to pass that test. I've looked at the American citizenship test, and some of those questions I don't even know myself, so I couldn't even get into my own country. So I don't know how it is for EU, but I'm sure it's pretty similar. So not only that, you would have to take your citizenship test, and you would have to learn a new language, English, and you would have to play League of Legends professionally, and you'd probably have to do some streaming because you have a streaming rights with a partnership with Twitch or a Zubu or whatever. So, and I think this is the reason why Rush couldn't stay on C9. So let's go over the potential scenarios of what the C9 roster could have been. So you have Rush and Impact, which everyone was kind of excited for. But the thing about that is, okay, so you would have had the kind of similar Reignover and Huni style, and that's what everyone was expecting. But everyone forgets that Immortals struggled super fucking hard against any higher competition, even domestically with C9, CLG, and TSM. They struggled against all of those teams. So internationally, they would have struggled as well. And then you have Fnatic, who just got stomped and obliterated by Ku Tigers, which who wouldn't? So you have those faults of basically the enemy team is going to know that you have a top lane priority and you want Impact to snowball. So if you take Impact and you take Rush, that means your mid lane is going to be open. And let's look at the mid lane NA talent. Huhi and Pobelter, which are already on other teams. And those are the best NA mid lane talents, which in the 2017 spring split, they're like middle, lower half in terms of mid laners, I would rate. So you have to choose even lower than that. So now your mid lane is very weak. So now let's go over the Rush and Jensen aspect. So with Rush and Jensen, you would have a sort of disconnect for a language barrier a little bit, even though Rush had stayed there for quite a while, so that isn't as severe. But now you have top lane open, which you have to get a NA resident. So top lane, the best NA top laners are Hanser, just really fucking good, this split, and then you have Lorlo, who's okay. So you have to get someone who's like up to that status, because we all know all the other NA top or imported top laners are beasts. So and there's no real good top lane talent in NA. So then that leaves you with our current iteration of Impact and Jensen, which I believe is the best iteration in terms of like what you could have chosen between all of that. And so let's be honest, if we allowed 5 players to be imported in the scene, they'd all just be Korean, and we just get taken over by our Korean overlords. And with that, there would be a dissonance or like a fragmentation between the pro players and the fans. So first of all, let's talk about even something simple like interviews. So interviews would be even lower quality because now you have people struggling with a language barrier and they can't even talk to their fans, and the interviews become more simplistic so that they can actually talk to their fans. And now the second part is national pride, which is very important actually. So things like soccer, for instance, everyone's always excited about the World Cup, even if you don't watch soccer, or sorry, football for the EU guys. So even if you don't watch soccer, football, everyone's rooting for their home team. You're rooting for America, you're rooting for Germany, you're rooting for Brazil, whatever. And the national pride is on the line. Well, that's the same thing with esports. And so without that, there's this kind of disconnection, like, oh, hey, all of our players are Korean, so like, is it really our team? Is it not? Like, who knows? And I think the biggest aspect, and one of the reasons why Riot decided to do this in the first place, was the sponsorships and their demographics. So if you have a whole bunch of imports, from China or Korea going into NA and just creating teams, then you have a demographic disconnection. They're residing in NA, and yet they're Korean or they're Chinese. So now you have to cover 2 different type of demographics. And that can be difficult as a sponsor, as we see in the EU scene, as some people have already stated how it's really hard to get sponsorships because the countries are so small and there's so many, and only certain companies do certain business within certain countries. So there's that aspect, which I think is probably the biggest aspect, especially for Riot. So for import rule, yeah, it makes sense, and I think it does lower the competition a little bit, but it forces the Koreans to go back home because there's not enough import slots for everyone to join, every team everywhere else. But so that returns the power back to Korea a little bit, which sucks. But I mean, basically that means that everyone just has to stop being shitters and get on Korea's level.